I am Kalifa Oliver. I currently have my own coaching and consulting firm, Kalifa K Consulting. And so it's focused on executive coaching, on experience, or what I call experience coaching, and really focus on confidence coaching. But my focus as a whole is really on creating experiences. Employee experience is one of my passions because I truly believe we can have really good experiences at work. We could be better about it. We can use data for it, which I don't think we're really good at. But as I've done this work, I realized that I have a passion for making sure people just have good experiences in everything that we do. And so that's what I'm all about right now. But the boring parts, my background is in IO psychology. I have certification from MIT in people analytics, over 15 years of working experience, and lots of Fortune 100 companies where I have worked internally and I have consulted with. So that's the boring stuff.
I really get a sense of your credibility. You certainly sounds like you've gained so much experience. The thing that really attracted me to inviting you to be part of this and wanting to have a conversation with you is that there are so many different aspects of culture and people experience that because it's such a ambiguous topic to some, there's a lot of things kind of just accepted and not really like, okay, well, actually, is it that? Or is that just what some people think or what some influence say? So, what I really loved about what I've seen of your work is you pick a topic and then you're like, well, actually, let's look
Let's
into
break
that.
it
And so, what
down.
I wanted,
Yeah.
yeah, exactly. You say it better than me. So what I wanted to do was pick a. Let's take a look at some of those in the time that we got today and explore those for the Culturevist community.
Let's do it. I'm
So
all for it.
the first one, culture is driven from the bottom. So a lot of people typically say culture is from the top. So could you share your thinking around culture is driven from the bottom?
So I think a lot of people say culture is driven from the top because those are the people who we think set the agenda, which is true, right? But you can write down whatever you want. You could come up with whatever leadership principles you think you have. That is not your culture. Your culture is what people interact with on a day to day basis, right? Your culture is what's reflected in how people feel when they do their job every day and when your customers interact with you as a business. If you think of a country's culture, when you go and you really get absorbed in a culture, it's about what you're seeing on a day to day, what you're interacting with when you get to the airport and you interact with people who are selling you stuff, or a taxi driver or Uber driver. That's where you get a sense of what the culture is, right? The people at the top, however, what they do is they can influence culture, right? So you might see their influence in fashion in a country, right? You might see that. But the culture is based on what is done from a date, because the people who top could put on whatever fashion they want. If the rest of us aren't gonna wear it and do deliver it, the different versions of it and really rock it, then there's no culture. It does not get into the culture until it becomes a part of somebody's day to day experience, right? And in businesses, a lot of people like to write it down and say, this is our culture. They do a lovely marketing sweep. This is our culture. No, what you do as a leader is you can write it down. You can role model the behaviors. You can continue to try to carry out those behaviors. You can reinforce it at the top. That's what you can do. And you can break it very quickly. People at the top can destroy cultures very quickly, right? And we see that in businesses every day now. We see that just on a day to day basis right now, how quickly it can be broken. Those people that your customers interact with, that build your product, that manage your people, that's where your culture is driven. That's where that is. Your culture are not words on a paper and it's not what you have out on social media. That's not what your culture is. But if I go into Glassdoor or I go into Blind or I really look at LinkedIn where people are hashtagging you during their worst moments with your company, like layoffs, that's where I see what your culture really looks like. That's how I know it's driven from the bottom.
Yeah, I really appreciate your like the way you view it. I actually think of it similarly. So I describe culture as a force, and that force is made up of all the different combinations of influences in a company. So, as you say, it might be here are our company values or our guiding principles or our vision statement. So, these are things that we say and they can guide it, but it depends on the culture.
Exactly.
Similar, as you say, like managers or leadership have the power to hire people and promote people or not promote people and fire people and so on. So these are some of the like levers or actions that people can take to influence the culture, but they alone are not the culture.
Exactly.
And if there's a gap, like whatever gap there is between what is said and what is done by people, your culture includes that gap, and that gap will make people feel as though either you're being dishonest or you're not good enough for achieving what you're achieving, or you don't realize how you're doing. So yeah, these are some of the thoughts that go in my mind when I hear the way you describe it.
Absolutely. Like, traditionally, when you thought of like startups and tech, when tech was burgeoning on the scene, right? Like, the whole, oh, we have sleep pods, we have table tennis, we have a masseuse, so that was the culture, that was the employment culture that, oh, tech has some of the best culture ever. And everybody's like, yeah. And it's funny because in my mind, I was like, these sound good, but it also sounds like a reason not to leave work. It sounds like you want me there all the time. So I had like hesitate. I'm like, that doesn't sound like the best culture. It sounds good, but it doesn't sound like the best long-term sustainable culture that you're gonna build, because you're really building a culture of overwork, and that can become toxic very, very quickly. That's a burnout culture, right? And so it sounds like well-being until you really look at what people are experiencing from day to day, right? And in many quiet moments when I used to talk to people in tech, I would be like, but don't y'all have a good time? It's in the culture. They're like, listen, it's not great. And right, and you couldn't say it out loud because the that went against the what was being put out there about what the cultures were. And so imagine everybody's shock when all the Netflix documentaries and the Hulu documentaries and everything came out about some of the toxicity that existed in these cultures, the overwork, the underpayment, the abuse in many of these cultures, right? That came out, and like, I thought they had a good culture. I'm like, no, because culture was what everybody was experiencing, right? And all it takes is for some of these companies to fall on hard times. What it took was some of these companies to face some pressure. What it took was famine because they were in feast, right? That's what it took. And then you see layoffs, and in the worst way possible, right? And you see the terrible experience, you see the stories start coming out. That was the culture. And it always was, no matter what their PR machine said. And those things always come out eventually. Culture is sustainable, right? And you can put as many band aids and as much marketing spin as you'd like. Culture sustains time, it sustains pressure, it sustains pain, it sustains good times, it sustains feast and famine. And what we're seeing right now is a lot of cultures, they're not surviving the famine, which means that you are a PR machine and you didn't do what you had to do to create really sustainable culture.
I can I can see how some of the most influential factors in a culture, such as what is prioritized when decisions are made, where is budget allocated, who makes decisions, who is involved, and so on. Some of these factors that affected culture may have, yeah, been like had other things around them, like the office environment or the way people dressed or the way people
Right.
spoke to each other. Like these different, there were many different factors that affected someone's experience. And then what's happened, I think, partly due to when there was the shift of companies working from home, and now there are the economic challenges. it's like as you talk, it makes me think it's almost like, okay, some of those things that were either not as strong because they weren't really believed by the leadership, or may not be as important to them, they've kind of got diluted and faded away. So what you're left with, it kind of reveals what is most important to the people with the power in
Yeah.
shaping people's experiences. And then that's very revealing for, okay, is this still a company that I'd want to be part of? Is it still managed in a way that I would like things to be managed?
Exactly. You've hit the nail on the head. That's exactly what's happening, right? And you'll notice who's the first to go, right? There are bad decisions that were made. There were terrible forecasts that were done, right? There was a series of overhiring in a lot of these organizations, right? And so it sounded good. It sounded good, but it was unsustainable practice. And so a lot of these things that were put into place appeared very people centric until you realize it wasn't, right? When your people are the first to be punished when a bad decision you made, right? Or when the tide shift, or when money shrinks just a little bit, or you can't get every single dollar in profit, right? When your people are the first people, the first things you throw under the bus, right? In the name of not just profit, but ensuring that you can pay shareholders, or just so that you can make sure that your bonus doesn't change, then those policies and things that you put into place to represent your culture, they weren't sustainable, and they weren't really people centric, right? The people centricity of it may have been a nice side effect, and it was a good PR. It sounded really good. But when the going got tough, you're like, I'm sorry, y'all gotta go. Like, I'm so we made some baddies. So we knew this was unsustainable, right? We knew it was unsustainable, but this wasn't about you. This was about what could you have done to bring us as much profit as possible. Like think about it. There are a lot of companies right now that have made the most profit they have made for a very long time during one of the worst periods of most people's lives. The absolute worst period, and they are highly profitable. They've made the most profit, and you know what they did anyway? They didn't share that profit. They laid off people immediately, and then told them get back in the office, right? So it wasn't really about, you didn't design anything to feed your culture. What you did was you put things into place to help you the whole time. And listen, I understand that businesses need to make money. I'm the first to say, like, money has to be a part of it. But your culture, your employee experience should be a strategic impairment, like an imperative, sorry, that is tied to your bottom line and is tied to your operational decisions, right? Because your people experience, your employee experience is one of the products that you're giving. When you hire somebody, you are selling them a product. That is what they're buying. That package is what they're buying from you. And you wouldn't necessarily want to do that to a customer with your product. You tell them you're buying this product and they get the other product and they're like complaining. You might refund them. You might give them a way out. You're going to take that beating online, right? You will do what you need to do with your market research to correct that issue. But you don't do that with your people. You don't even want to listen. You don't want to ask a survey. That's crazy, right? You don't want to do any of it because you don't think that that's a product that matters. And so you think your brand proposition and your employer brand is just your marketing and PR spin. But one thing that I think a lot of leaders really need to sit down and realize is that these generations right now, millennials, Gen Z, they do not care. They want that brand proposition. They want that value. They want that product that you're selling them to be consistent. They don't want you taking everything away from them. They watch that happen with the last generation. They watch Gen X, sorry, they watch them, right? They want some better. They want congruency between what you're saying and what your culture is and what you're offering and what you're giving back to the world. They understand you need to make money, right? They get that. But at the cost of what and who? And that's a shift in generational culture that is not going away. These are people who, like, think of millennials. They've been through everything. And I'm one of them. Everything that happened in this world, we've been through it, right? So we know that there are different questions we have to ask because generational culture is shifting. And that's your workforce now. And that's what's going to dictate what your day to day is. That's your culture. That's the way it's being driven. You could fight it, but that's they're in the driver's seat, whether you like it or not. But to your point, the people with the power still have the ability to make the decisions, and until it starts really affecting their bottom line, again, just like COVID did, they're not going to shift until they see that change.
So there are a couple of things following what you've just said that I'd love for us to cover before we finish. So the first is when people talk about generations in the workplace, so you mentioned Gen Z and millennials and Gen X, for example, I guess we're conscious that while it's what while people can say, oh, it's oversimplifying it to classify a whole group of people as like one label, such as Gen Z. My sense is that that's true in terms of, yeah, people have very different preferences or needs or experiences. But one thing that group of Gen Z, for example, do have in common, and you can group them all under, is the time in the world that they grew up in. So the technology they have, the societal challenges or great opportunities, that's what they have in common. And that's what does mean that we can group people together on that broad banner. Is that how you'd see it?
Exactly. So yes, and to be clear, I think a lot of the general differences that we discuss at work, they're just excuses, right? And it's very overblown. Like the differences in generation is overblown, right? Every last generation says the next generation doesn't want to work. That's just historical. We hear that same nonsense all the time. Everybody likes to look in hindsight and say, yo, oh, these kids, right? We love to say that nonsense. And I'm sure, Gen Z will be saying that about two generations down, right? But you're right. They all live in a moment and a historical time. They're all a part of a certain part of history. They can see the consequences of decisions that have happened before them. They see political and economic landscapes, right? They see environmental differences that affect them directly. They see financial things that affect them directly. They're a part of that moment. And they have the right to demand that I am going to be here for a while. And so I have the right to start dictating the kind of life we need to lead, right? Most what we call generational differences at work are really life stage differences, right? They're not necessarily a function of generation, it's just a function of life stage, right? So when I just come out of school, my life stage is very different from when I decide to settle down and get married or get a partner, or if I decide to have a kid. Each one means I'm in a different life stage of my life, and my priorities are just a little bit different. But you have to remember, all these people went through COVID, right? At a very different time in their lives. Some were just graduating. A lot of the promises they thought economically they were having are gone, right? And that's the moment they're all living under. And I think we need to honor that and respect that. And we also need to recognize these are adults. These are adults who have the right to ask, what are you leaving on the table for me? Right? We have this notion where we want to kid them. They're not kids. They're not kids. Like millennials are in their 40s now, right? Like we can't keep kidding them all the time and saying saying this is not important. They have power. They may not have the economic and financial power, but they have the power of numbers right now. They have technology in a way that boomers didn't have. And I tell this to people all the time. If boomers had the type of technology that Gen Gen Z and millennials are, they're not done the same thing. They're not taking all kinds of selfies. Just stop it, right? It's just they're different. So like, let's think of the argument about remote work. Oh, we need to be more in person to be more innovative, blah blah blah. I'm like, the people with the power structures are also taking for granted that this is a generation of people who grew up with technology. They know how to use technology. Some of these kids are basically coming out the womb coded. I think my kids know how to use every function on my computers better than me, and they are 3, 6, and 8, right? And so this remote thing where you feel like you can't remote work, it doesn't process to them because this is technology that is a part of their life. It's for some people, it's like this is just like a computer, right? This is a car. What do you mean you didn't have a car? What do you mean you didn't have a cell phone, right? They can't imagine that because they can't process it. And what we don't realize is often we're having two different conversations. So for example, think if we go back to the cultural conversation, a lot of the leaders are saying these people just don't want to be in office to get together and have these conversations like we used to. What they're saying is we don't have to, right? We don't have to do some of the things that you did because by nature of where we are in time, our lives are already different from yours. And we have options you did not have. And now you're trying to take us to a point where those options did not exist. And you're asking us to ignore those options, right? And that's why it's not making sense because we're not listening and we're still saying kids and they're not kids. And we're ignoring the fact that, to your point, they're in a different point in time. They're in a different culture. They're in a different stage of technology. They're way past where we were, right? Like, can you fathom? I was there when Facebook was birthed. Like, now we're dancing on TikTok. They don't know what Facebook was birthed. We're not even on there, kind of thing, you know? So it's an interesting thing to just look at.
I've really appreciated the opportunity to really go deep on a topic with you. So thank you so much for sharing what you have. If people think, I want to hear more, how can they follow you?
So I'm on all social media. I think I've caught up on all social media platforms now. So I'm Dr. Kalifa. Oh, you can go on my website. So I have a lot of stuff posted on there. That is KalifaOliver.com. But the easiest place to find me is LinkedIn. That is the easiest place to find me. And of course, I'm on YouTube as well. Again, Dr. Khalifa O if you're looking for me. But LinkedIn is where I usually am. I post content on there. I talk a lot about employee experience. I talk a lot about just experience management and confidence consulting and that kind of stuff. So if you're looking for me, I'm easy to find. I'm usually in bright orange.